You know what they say about pride coming before the fall? Well, let me tell you about the night my own son learned that lesson the hard way. Picture this. His engagement party, 50 of his closest friends, champagne flowing, everyone dressed to the nines. And then my son Devin stands up, taps his glass, and says the words that would change everything between us forever. You know what's funny? He laughed, his voice carrying across the room. My dad here thinks he can actually afford my dream wedding. The room erupted in laughter. His fiancée Jessica covered her mouth, trying to hide her smile. His best friend Marcus was practically doubled over. And me? I just sat there, sipping my beer from a bottle while everyone else had crystal glasses, watching my son humiliate me in front of everyone who mattered to him. But here's the thing nobody knew that night, including Devin. I had a leather briefcase sitting right there beside my chair. And inside that briefcase, 13 property deeds. 13. Including the deed to the very house Devin had been dreaming about buying for the past 2 years. The same house he'd driven by every weekend, taking Jessica to see it, talking about how, someday when I make enough money, that's where we'll live. Yeah, that house. I owned it. Had owned it for 6 months, actually. Hold on, before I tell you what happened next, and trust me, you're going to want to stick around for this because Devin's reaction was, well, let's just say it was epic. Smash that subscribe button and ring the notification bell. Seriously, if you love stories about family drama, revenge served ice cold, and plot twists that'll make your jaw drop, you're in the right place. And drop a comment below telling me, have you ever had someone completely underestimate you? Because what happened next is going to blow your mind. Now back to the story. You want to know how we got to that moment? How a father ends up sitting at his son's engagement party, being mocked for being too poor to afford a wedding? Well, buckle up because this story goes deeper than you think. It started 3 years ago. Devin had just graduated college, University of Michigan, business degree, summa cum laude. I was proud. God, I was so proud. I'd worked my ass off to pay for that education, taking on extra shifts at the construction company where I'd been a foreman for 15 years. My hands were permanently stained with concrete dust, my back ached every morning, but seeing my boy walk across that stage, worth every sacrifice, but something changed after graduation. See, Devin got this job at a tech startup in Austin. Good money, better than I'd ever made, that's for sure. Started at $65,000, which to him felt like winning the lottery. To me, it felt like validation. All those years of 16-hour days, all those times I came home too exhausted to help with homework, but too stubborn to quit. It had all been worth it. Except Devin didn't see it that way. The first sign was subtle. He stopped calling as much. When he did call, the conversations felt different, strained, like he was talking to a stranger instead of his dad. Then came the visit home for Christmas that year. He pulled into the driveway in a brand new BMW, lease, but still impressive, and when he got out, I barely recognized him. Designer clothes, expensive watch, hair styled in some way that probably cost more than I spent on groceries in a month. Dad, he said, and even his voice sounded different, more polished, like he'd been practicing how to talk. How are you doing? How was I doing? I was doing the same as I'd always been doing. Working construction, coming home tired, watching the news, going to bed early so I could get up at 5 a.m. and do it all over again. But looking at my son, seeing how he looked at our little 2-bedroom house with its worn carpets and outdated kitchen, I felt something I'd never felt before around Devin. I felt ashamed. I'm good, son, I lied. Real good. That Christmas dinner, Devin talked about his job, his new apartment, his new friends. Everything was amazing and incredible and next level. His mom, my ex-wife Linda, hung on every word. She'd always been proud of Devin, but now there was something else in her eyes. Relief, maybe. Like finally, her son had made it out of the life she'd always resented. See, Linda and I divorced when Devin was 12. Not because we hated each other, but because we wanted different things. She wanted more money, more status, more of everything. I wanted simple, steady work, family dinners, a quiet life. The divorce was amicable enough, but I always knew Linda thought Devin was destined for greater things than what I could provide. Sitting at that dinner table watching Devin describe his new life while barely making eye contact with me, I realized Linda might have been right. But here's what nobody knew. Not Devin, not Linda, nobody. 6 months before that Christmas dinner, something had happened that changed everything. My brother Tommy died. Tommy was 7 years older than me, never married, no kids. We weren't close. He'd moved to Dallas right after high school, and we maybe talked once a year. I knew he did well for himself, something in real estate, but we never talked about money. Tommy was private like that. So when his lawyer called me that November morning, I figured maybe Tommy had left me his truck or something. Maybe a few $1,000s. I drove to Dallas for the will reading, expecting maybe enough to finally fix the leaky roof on my house. What I got instead was a fortune. Tommy hadn't just done well in real estate. He'd been a goddamn genius at it. Started buying properties in the early 2000s, right before the boom. By the time he died, he owned 63 properties across Texas, Oklahoma, and Arkansas. Rental properties, commercial buildings, undeveloped land that had tripled in value. The total worth? $14.7 million. And he left it all to me. Your brother was very specific, the lawyer told me, sliding a thick folder across his mahogany desk. He said you were the only person he knew who wouldn't let money change who you are. I sat there in that lawyer's office, wearing my best shirt, which was still just a polo from Walmart, staring at papers that showed I was worth more money than I could even comprehend. $14.7 million. Plus the income from all those rental properties, about $48,000 a month after expenses. But here's the thing, and this is important. Tommy had one condition. He knew me well enough to know I'd probably give it all away or do something stupid with it. So he set up a trust. I could access the rental income, but the properties themselves were managed by a firm in Dallas. I could buy new properties, but I couldn't sell them for 5 years. And everything had to be done through the trust, which meant my name wasn't on anything publicly. As far as the world was concerned, I was still just Jake Morrison, construction foreman from a small town outside Houston. I decided to keep it that way. See, I'd watched enough people win the lottery or come into money to know what usually happened. Relationships change. People start treating you different. Suddenly everyone needs something from you. I didn't want that. I wanted to see who people really were when they thought I had nothing, including my son, so I kept working construction, kept living in the same house, kept driving the same 15-year-old Chevy pickup. The only difference was, now I had a very expensive hobby, buying real estate. The trust managers in Dallas were good at their job. When I told them I wanted to start buying properties in Austin, where Devin lived, they found me opportunities I never would have known existed. Houses about to go into foreclosure, commercial properties whose owners were desperate to sell, land that the city was planning to develop. Within 18 months, I owned 13 properties in Austin, including one very special property that I bought specifically because I knew Devin had fallen in love with it. It was a craftsman-style house in South Austin, built in 1925 but completely renovated. 3 bedrooms, 2.5 baths, a huge kitchen with granite countertops, hardwood floors throughout, and a backyard that looked like something out of a magazine. Devin had discovered it during an open house and called me, more excited than I'd heard him in years. "Dad, you should see this place," he said, his voice full of wonder. "It's perfect. I mean, absolutely perfect. Jessica and I drove by it again yesterday, and we just sat in the car imagining what it would be like to live there." "Sounds nice, son," I said. "What's it going for?" $420,000, he said, and I heard the deflation in his voice. "Way out of my league right now, but someday, you know. Someday when I've saved enough." I bought it the next week. Cash offer, $50,000 over asking price, closed in 10 days. The sellers were thrilled. The trust managers thought I was crazy. "Mr. Morrison, this property doesn't fit our usual investment criteria." But I didn't care. This wasn't about investment returns. This was about something else entirely. I was building an insurance policy against my son's disappointment. See, part of me knew Devin was starting to look down on me. I could hear it in his voice when he talked about his new life, see it in his eyes when he looked around my house. He was proud of how far he'd come, and I was happy for him. But somewhere along the way, he'd started measuring his success by how much distance he could put between himself and where he came from, between himself and me. I told myself I bought that house because I wanted to surprise him someday, maybe for his wedding gift, or when his first kid was born. I'd hand him the keys and say, "Surprise, son, it's yours." But if I'm being honest, really honest, I think I bought it for a different reason. I bought it because I was hurt. The next year and a half passed in a blur of phone calls that got shorter and visits that got rarer. Devin was promoted twice at work, started making real money, close to 6 figures, got himself a better apartment, a better car, better everything. And with each upgrade in his life, his opinion of mine seemed to get lower. It was subtle at first. Little comments about how I should think about retiring soon and enjoy the golden years. Suggestions that maybe I should sell the house and move into something smaller, more manageable. Questions about whether I was taking care of myself financially. The worst part? He meant well. In his mind, he was being a caring son, worried about his old man who was too proud or too stubborn to accept that he needed help. He had no idea that his old man was sitting on a real estate portfolio worth $15 million and growing. Then came the engagement. Devin called on a Tuesday night in March. I was sitting in my kitchen, paying bills, or pretending to anyway, since I hadn't actually worried about money in 2 years, when my phone rang. Dad. His voice was electric with excitement. I did it. I proposed. For a moment, all the weirdness between us melted away. This was my little boy calling to share the biggest moment of his life with me. "Devin, that's incredible. How'd it go? What did she say?" He laughed. "She said yes, obviously." "Oh my God, Dad, it was perfect. I took her to that house, you know, the one I told you about, the Craftsman in South Austin. They were having another open house and I convinced the realtor to let me propose in the backyard." Jessica started crying before I even got the ring out of my pocket. My heart clenched. He'd proposed in the backyard of a house I owned, a house I'd bought specifically because I knew how much he loved it. "That sounds perfect, son. I'm so happy for you." "Thanks, Dad. Listen, we're thinking about having an engagement party next month. Nothing too crazy, just close friends and family. You'll come, right?" "Of course I'll come. Wouldn't miss it." "Great. Oh, and Dad, don't worry about bringing anything fancy. I know money's probably tight with the economy and everything. Just having you there is enough." There it was again. That tone, that assumption that I was struggling, that I needed his permission to not stress about money. "I'll figure something out," I said. "I know you will. Love you, Dad." "Love you too, son." After I hung up, I sat in my kitchen for a long time, staring at my phone. Then I called the trust managers in Dallas. "I want to buy something special," I told them, "something that's going to make a statement." 3 weeks later, I owned a commercial property in downtown Austin, a restored warehouse that had been converted into event space. The previous owner was going through a nasty divorce and needed cash fast. I got it for $2.3 million, almost $1 million below market value. The kicker? It was the exact venue where Devin and Jessica had booked their engagement party. They were paying the previous owner $12,000 to rent the space for one night. Now they were paying me. They just didn't know it. The night of the party, I put on my best clothes. Khakis, a button-down shirt, and the sport coat I'd bought for Devin's college graduation. I looked in the mirror and saw exactly what I always saw, a working man trying to clean up nice. My hands still bore the calluses and scars of 30 years in construction. My boots were polished but obviously not expensive. I grabbed my briefcase, the same one I'd carried to the lawyer's office in Dallas 2 years earlier, and drove to the venue I now owned. The party was already in full swing when I arrived. The warehouse looked incredible. Exposed brick walls, string lights everywhere, a DJ in one corner, a bar in the other. Devin and Jessica had done a beautiful job with the decorating. They'd spent months planning this night, and it showed. I found Devin near the bar, surrounded by his friends from work. They all looked like him now, young, successful, confident. Designer shirts, expensive watches, perfect teeth. When Devin saw me, his face lit up. "Dad, you made it!" He hugged me, and for a moment, I remembered when he was 8 years old and would run to the door every night when I got home from work. "Wouldn't miss it, son." He introduced me to his friends, Tyler, Brandon, Connor, a bunch of names that all sounded the same to me. They were polite enough, shaking my hand, asking what I did for work. "I'm in construction," I said, and I watched their faces change slightly. Not rude exactly, but I could see them filing me away in a certain category. Devin's boss was there too, a guy named Harrison who couldn't have been older than 35, but talked like he'd invented business. He patted Devin on the back and said something about the apple not falling far from the tree, but the way he said it, I could tell he didn't mean it as a compliment. I found a table in the back and sat down with my beer. They were serving craft cocktails and wine, but I'd asked for a Bud Light and gotten some looks from the bartender. I watched Devin work the room, shaking hands, laughing at jokes, playing the part of the successful young professional. He was good at it. Really good. Jessica found me after about an hour. She was a sweet girl, kindergarten teacher, grew up in a small town not unlike where I'd raised Devin. I'd always liked her because she seemed to see past all the surface stuff that had become so important to my son. "Mr. Morrison," she said, sitting down across from me. "Thank you so much for coming. I know how much it means to Devin to have you here." "Thank you for making him so happy," I said. "I haven't seen him smile this much in years." She glanced around the room, then leaned forward slightly. "Can I tell you something? I'm a little nervous about the wedding planning. Devin has such big ideas, and I keep trying to tell him we should start smaller, but what? He keeps talking about this dream wedding he's planning. Live band, 5-course dinner, destination bachelor party, the works. It sounds incredible, but it also sounds expensive. Really expensive." I took a sip of my beer. "How expensive?" "He's talking about spending $80,000, Mr. Morrison, maybe more. And when I ask him how we're going to afford it, he just says not to worry about it, that he's got it covered." Something cold settled in my stomach. "Does he?" Jessica shrugged. "I mean, he makes good money now, but $80,000? That's more than I make in a year teaching." I suggested maybe we could ask both sets of parents to chip in, but Devin said. She paused, looking uncomfortable. "What did he say?" "He said your situation was probably too tight to help much, but that his mom might be able to contribute something." There it was again. My situation, like I was some kind of charity case he needed to manage. "Well," I said carefully, "I'm sure you two will figure something out." Jessica smiled, but I could see the worry in her eyes. "I hope so. I love him so much, Mr. Morrison. But sometimes I feel like he's living in a fantasy world where money just appears when you need it." 20 minutes later, that fantasy world came crashing down. Devin had been drinking, not drunk, but confident in that way people get when they've had just enough alcohol to say things they might otherwise keep to themselves. He'd been holding court near the bar, telling some story about a client at work, when someone mentioned the wedding. "Oh man, you guys are going to throw the party of the century," Tyler said. "I've heard the plans. Epic doesn't even begin to cover it." "Yeah, well, Jessica deserves the best," Devin said, pulling her close. "Nothing's too good for my girl." "Must be nice having parents who can help out," Connor added. "My wedding damn near bankrupted us, even with both families chipping in." And that's when it happened. Devin laughed. Not a mean laugh exactly, but dismissive. Well, we're pretty much on our own for this one. My mom might be able to help a little, but he glanced over at me, sitting alone at my table with my beer. My dad's situation is pretty tight right now. Construction work, you know? Doesn't exactly pay for dream weddings. A few people chuckled. Not cruel laughter, but the kind of polite amusement people make when someone says something slightly awkward. But Devin wasn't done. Actually, he said, his voice carrying across the room now. It's kind of funny. Dad keeps talking about how proud he is of me, how far I've come, but I think deep down he's a little jealous, you know? Here I am, 26 years old, making more in a year than he probably makes in 2. Living the life he never could. The room had gotten quieter now. People were listening, sensing that something was shifting. "Devin," Jessica whispered, tugging on his arm. "Maybe we should—" "No, it's okay," Devin said, his voice louder now. "It's actually sweet in a way. Dad still thinks he's going to swoop in and save the day somehow, like he's going to magically come up with $30,000 or $40,000 to help pay for this wedding." He laughed again, and this time it was definitely mean. I love the guy, but let's be realistic here. He's been living paycheck to paycheck his whole life. The room was completely quiet now. Everyone was looking at Devin, then at me, then back at Devin. Jessica looked mortified. Some of his friends were studying their drinks, clearly uncomfortable. But Devin was on a roll now, and the alcohol had loosened his tongue past the point of good judgment. "You know what's really funny?" he said, and I knew I should stop this. Should get up and leave, should do anything other than sit there and let my son humiliate me in front of 50 people. But I was frozen. Dad drove by that house again last week, the Craftsman where I proposed. He was parked outside when Jessica and I went by for our Sunday drive, just staring at it like he was trying to figure out how to buy it for us as a wedding gift. More uncomfortable silence. Someone coughed. "The thing is," Devin continued, "that house costs $420,000. My dad's truck is worth maybe $3,000. His house is worth maybe $150,000. Everything he owns in the world wouldn't cover the down payment on my dream house, let alone the whole thing." And then he said it. The words that changed everything between us forever. You know what they say about pride coming before the fall? Well, sometimes I think my dad needs to fall a little harder. Maybe then he'll realize that good intentions don't pay for dream weddings, and working with your hands your whole life doesn't make you a hero. It just makes you broke. The room was dead silent now. I could hear the music from the DJ, could hear someone's ice clinking in their glass, could hear my own heart beating in my ears. Devin looked around the room, suddenly realizing that his little monologue had killed the party vibe. "I mean," he said, his voice smaller now, "I love my dad, I do, but let's be honest about what he can and can't do, you know?" That's when I stood up. I didn't say anything at first. I just stood up, walked to my table, and picked up my briefcase. The same briefcase I'd carried to the lawyer's office in Dallas. The same briefcase where I'd kept every property deed, every document, every piece of paper that proved my son was the biggest fool in the room. I walked slowly across the warehouse, my warehouse, while 50 people watched me. Some of them probably thought I was leaving. Some probably thought I was about to start crying or yelling or making a scene. Instead, I stopped right next to Devin and set my briefcase on the bar. "Son," I said quietly, "there's something I need to show you." I opened the briefcase and pulled out a manila folder. Inside that folder were 13 property deeds. 13 pieces of paper that were about to turn my son's world upside down. "What's this?" Devin asked, and I could hear the nervousness creeping into his voice. "These are property deeds," I said, loud enough for everyone to hear. 13 of them, to be exact. I opened the folder and pulled out the first deed. "This one's for a commercial building downtown. Bought it last year for $1.2 million. Cash." Devin's face went pale. "Dad, what are you—" I pulled out the second deed. "This one's for a duplex near the university. Brings in about $3,800 a month in rent." More deeds. 4-unit apartment complex, strip mall in Round Rock, office building near the state capitol. Devin was staring at the papers like they were written in a foreign language. The whole room was dead silent. And then I pulled out the last deed, the one I'd been saving. And this one, I said, holding it up so everyone could see, is for a craftsman-style house in South Austin. 3 bedrooms, 2.5 baths, completely renovated. Beautiful backyard. Devin's face went completely white. That's impossible. Bought it 6 months ago, I said calmly. For $470,000. Cash. The same house where you proposed to Jessica. The same house you drive by every weekend, dreaming about someday living there. I could hear Jessica gasp. Someone in the crowd said, "Holy shit," under their breath. The funny thing is, I continued, I bought it specifically for you. Was going to give it to you as a wedding present. Had the papers all drawn up, ready to transfer the deed into your name. Devin's mouth was opening and closing like a fish out of water. How is this possible? My brother Tommy died 2 years ago, I said. Left me his entire real estate portfolio, $14.7 million worth of properties, plus about $48,000 a month in rental income. The room was so quiet, you could have heard a pin drop. I kept working construction because I wanted to. I kept living in the same house because I like it there. I kept driving the same truck because it runs fine. And I kept all of this secret because I wanted to see who you really were when you thought I had nothing. Devin was shaking his head. Dad, I'm sorry. You didn't know. I finished for him. No, you didn't. But you know what you did know? You knew I was your father. You knew I'd worked my ass off to put you through college. You knew I'd sacrificed everything to give you opportunities I never had. And instead of being grateful for that, instead of being proud of where you came from, you decided I was something to be ashamed of. I started putting the deeds back in the folder. You want to know what's really funny, Devin? This whole party tonight, you're paying $12,000 to rent this space. Except now you're paying me because I bought this building 3 weeks ago. Devin looked like he was going to throw up. And that dream wedding you're planning? The $80,000 extravaganza that you're so worried about paying for? I could write you a check right now for the whole thing and not even notice the money missing from my account. I closed the folder and put it back in my briefcase. But I'm not going to do that. The silence in the room was deafening. See, son, you taught me something important tonight. You taught me that money doesn't change who people are. It reveals who they've always been. And what you revealed tonight is that the success you're so proud of, the life you've built for yourself, it's all built on looking down on people you think are beneath you. I picked up my briefcase and looked around the room at all of Devin's friends, all the people who'd been laughing at the poor construction worker just 20 minutes earlier, including the man who made it all possible. I started to walk away, then stopped and turned back. Oh, and Devin? That house I bought for you? I'm keeping it. Going to turn it into a rental property. Maybe some nice young couple will live there someday. A couple who appreciates what they have instead of being embarrassed by where it came from. I made it halfway across the room before Devin found his voice. Dad, wait, please, I'm sorry, I didn't mean... I turned around one more time. You know what the saddest part of all this is, son? I came here tonight planning to surprise you. I had a check in my briefcase for $100,000, your wedding gift. I was going to wait until the toasts and then stand up and tell everyone how proud I was of you, how you deserved the best wedding money could buy. Devin was crying now, real tears streaming down his face. Instead, I got to hear my own son tell a room full of people that I'm a jealous old man who needs to learn his place, that working with my hands my whole life makes me a failure, that being proud of you somehow makes me pathetic. I looked around the room one more time. Enjoy the rest of your party, everyone. The bar's paid for through midnight. And then I walked out of my own building, got in my 15-year-old Chevy pickup, and drove home. But the story doesn't end there. Not even close. I got home around 10 that night and sat in my kitchen, still wearing my sport coat, still carrying that briefcase. I kept thinking about the look on Devin's face when I showed him those deeds. The shock, the confusion, the dawning realization that everything he thought he knew about his father was wrong. Part of me felt vindicated. He'd gotten exactly what he deserved, right? After months of condescending comments and barely hidden embarrassment, he'd finally learned that his old man wasn't quite the failure he'd assumed. But another part of me just felt empty. This wasn't how it was supposed to happen. I was supposed to surprise him on his wedding day, or when his first grandchild was born, or on some random Tuesday when he needed to know that his dad could still save the day. It was supposed to be a moment of joy, of connection, of showing him that all those sacrifices had been worth it. Instead, it had become a moment of revenge. And revenge, even when it's justified, doesn't taste as sweet as you think it's going to. I was still sitting there an hour later when my phone rang. Devon's name on the caller ID. I almost didn't answer. What was there to say? But on the fifth ring, I picked up. Dad? His voice was small, broken. Nothing like the confident young professional who'd been holding court at the bar earlier. Yeah, son. I fucked up. He was crying again. I fucked up so bad. I didn't say anything. Jessica left. She said she couldn't believe what I said about you, that she didn't know who I was anymore. Everyone else left too. The party just, died. I'm sitting here alone in this building that you apparently own, and I don't understand how I got here. Where's here, Devon? I don't know who I am anymore, he whispered. I thought I was this successful guy who'd made something of himself, but really I'm just an asshole who spent 2 years looking down on the best man I know. The best man he knew. When was the last time he'd said anything like that about me? I'm coming over, he said. I need to see you. I need to understand how this happened. I don't think that's a good idea tonight, son. Please, Dad. Please. I need to make this right. I looked around my little kitchen with its worn countertops and outdated appliances. The kitchen where I'd eaten dinner alone most nights for the past 2 years, while my son lived his glamorous life across town. All right, I said. Come on over. He was there in 20 minutes. When I opened the door, he looked terrible. His expensive shirt wrinkled, his perfect hair messed up, his eyes red from crying. He looked like a little boy who'd fallen off his bike and couldn't understand why the world had suddenly gotten so complicated. We sat at my kitchen table, the same table where we'd done homework together when he was a kid, where we'd eaten countless bowls of cereal on Saturday mornings, where I'd taught him how to play poker with pennies when he was 12. Tell me about Uncle Tommy, he said quietly. So I did. I told him about the phone call, about driving to Dallas expecting maybe a few $1,000s and walking out worth almost $15 million. I told him about the trust, about the rental income, about the decision to keep it all secret. Why didn't you tell me? He asked. Honestly? At first I wasn't sure how to handle it. It was so much money, so overwhelming. I thought maybe I'd wait a year, get used to it, figure out the best way to help you without making things weird. And then I looked at my son, really looked at him. He was 26 years old, successful, engaged to a wonderful girl, living a life most people would envy. But sitting there in my kitchen, he looked lost. And then you started changing, I said. Every conversation we had, I could hear you pulling away, like you were embarrassed by me, by this house, by the life I'd given you. And I realized that if I told you about the money, I'd never know if you wanted to be around me because you loved me or because I could help you. Devon put his head in his hands. God, Dad, I'm so sorry. I never meant for you to feel that way. But I did feel that way. Every time you suggested I should retire, every time you made some comment about my situation, every time you looked around this house like it was something you needed to escape from, it hurt. I thought I was being helpful, he said quietly. I thought you were too proud to admit you were struggling. I wasn't struggling, son, I was just living simply. We sat in silence for a long time. Finally, Devon looked up at me. The house, he said. The one where I proposed. You really bought it for me? I nodded. And you were really going to give it to me? As a wedding gift. Had the lawyers draw up all the papers. His eyes filled with tears again. What happens now? That was the question, wasn't it? What happened now? I don't know, I said honestly. Tonight hurt, Devin. Not just the embarrassment of being mocked in front of all those people, but hearing my own son talk about me like I was some kind of burden, like everything I'd done for you, everything I'd sacrificed, didn't matter because I didn't have enough money to be worth respecting. That's not what I meant, but it's what you said. He nodded, accepting that. You're right. That's exactly what I said. So now I'm wondering, if I transfer that house to you, if I pay for your wedding, if I help you with a down payment on some other place, am I fixing the problem, or am I just enabling it? Devin looked confused. What do you mean? I mean, are you sorry because you realize you hurt your father, or are you sorry because you found out your father has money that could make your life easier? The question hung in the air between us like a challenge. I don't know, Devin said finally, and I respected him for his honesty. I want to say it's because I hurt you, and that's definitely part of it. But if I'm being completely honest, I'm also thinking about all the things you could help me with, all the opportunities this opens up. At least he was being truthful. Here's what's going to happen, I said. Nothing. What? Nothing's going to change, Devin. I'm going to keep living here, keep working construction, keep managing my properties through the trust. You're going to keep your job, keep your apartment, keep planning your wedding. But Dad, and you're going to figure out how to pay for that wedding yourself, how to live within your means, how to appreciate what you have instead of always wanting more. Devin's face fell. So you're not going to help me at all? I didn't say that. He looked confused again. Here's the deal, I said, leaning forward. You want my help? You want access to this money? Then you're going to earn it. What do you mean? I mean you're going to learn what it means to work for something, really work. Not just show up to an office and push papers around, but actually build something with your hands. I stood up and walked to the kitchen window, looking out at the backyard where Devin used to play when he was a kid. Every Saturday for the next 6 months, you're going to come work with me. Construction sites, rental property maintenance, whatever needs doing. You're going to learn what it feels like to come home with dirt under your fingernails and concrete dust in your hair. Dad, I don't understand. And you're going to do it for the same pay I started with 30 years ago. $8 an hour. Devin's mouth dropped open. $8 an hour? I make more than that in 10 minutes at my regular job. Exactly. And maybe after you've spent 6 months making $8 an hour, you'll understand why the money I've made from properties doesn't make me any less valuable than the money you make from pushing papers. I turned back to face him. And maybe, if you can do that, if you can work beside me for 6 months without complaining, without acting like the work is beneath you, then we'll talk about wedding gifts. Devin stared at me for a long time. I could see him thinking, calculating, trying to figure out if this was worth it. What about Jessica? He asked finally. She left tonight. I don't even know if we're still engaged. That's between you and her, but if I was you, I'd start with an apology, a real one. Not because you got caught, but because you understand what you did wrong. He nodded slowly. Okay, I'll do it. The Saturday thing, I mean. Working with you. You sure? It's not going to be easy, and it's not going to be glamorous. Your fancy friends aren't going to understand why you're spending your weekends doing manual labor. I don't care about them, he said, and for the first time all night he sounded like the boy I'd raised instead of the man he'd become. I just want to fix this. I want to fix us. We shook hands across my kitchen table. It felt like a business deal and a truce all at once. Devin left around midnight, and I sat there for a while longer, wondering if I was doing the right thing. Part of me wanted to just give him everything, the house, the money, the easy path forward. But another part of me knew that would be the worst thing I could do for him. He needed to understand that respect isn't something you buy. It's something you earn. The next morning, I woke up to 17 missed calls, and 43 text messages. Word had spread about what happened at the engagement party, and everyone wanted to know if it was true. Was quiet Jake Morrison really sitting on a real estate empire? I ignored most of them, but one call I couldn't avoid. Linda, Devin's mom, called at 7 a.m. "Jake," she said as soon as I picked up. "What the hell happened last night?" "Hello to you too, Linda." Devin called me crying at 2 in the morning, telling me some story about you owning half of Austin. Please tell me he was drunk and making things up. He wasn't drunk. Well, not that drunk. Silence. Then, "Are you serious? You're actually rich?" "I'm actually comfortable." "How comfortable?" "Comfortable enough that I don't have to worry about money anymore." Another long silence. "And you didn't tell me?" Here we go, I thought. Why would I tell you, Linda? We've been divorced for 14 years. Because Devin is my son too. Because I've been worried about his college loans, his wedding expenses, his future, and the whole time his father has been sitting on a fortune doing nothing about it. I haven't been doing nothing. I've been watching, learning, figuring out who my son really is when he thinks his dad can't help him. And what did you learn? I thought about Devin's words from the night before, about pride coming before the fall, about how working with your hands doesn't make you a hero, just broke. I learned that success without character is just expensive failure. Linda was quiet for a moment. Devin told me what he said at the party. Yeah. He's ashamed, Jake. Really ashamed. Good. He should be. Are you going to help him? With the wedding, I mean? Maybe, if he earns it. What does that mean? I told her about my Saturday work deal. Linda listened without interrupting, which was unusual for her. You're making him work construction for $8 an hour? She said finally. I'm giving him the chance to understand where he comes from. Jake, he's got a college degree. He's a successful professional. This is beneath him. And there it was. The attitude that had infected my son, probably learned at his mother's knee. Linda, let me ask you something. What's beneath him? Working with his hands? Building something useful? Making an honest living? That's not what I meant. That's exactly what you meant. You think construction work is beneath your college-educated son. You think the job that paid for his education, that put food on his table for 18 years, that built the foundation for everything he has now is somehow not good enough for him to do. I just think, I know what you think. You think success means never having to do anything difficult or dirty or humble. You think moving up in the world means leaving behind everyone who helped you get there. I could hear her getting defensive. I never said that. You didn't have to say it. You showed it every day we were married. Every time you complained about this house, about my job, about our life. Every time you talked about wanting more, like what we had wasn't enough. Jake. And now Devin thinks the same way. He's embarrassed by me, embarrassed by where he came from, embarrassed by the idea that his success might be connected to someone else's hard work. Linda was quiet for a long time. Finally, she said, "What do you want from him?" I want him to understand that being successful doesn't mean being superior. I want him to respect the people who helped him get where he is. And I want him to realize that money without character is worthless. And if he does your construction work for 6 months, you'll help pay for the wedding? If he does the work with the right attitude, if he learns what I'm trying to teach him, then yeah, I'll help. What if he doesn't? I thought about that craftsman house, sitting empty while I decided what to do with it. Then he'll figure out his own way forward, like the rest of us did. After Linda hung up, I sat on my back porch with my coffee, watching the sun come up over the neighborhood I'd called home for 20 years. It wasn't the fanciest neighborhood. Working-class families, older houses, chain-link fences, and pickup trucks in most driveways. But it was honest. People here worked for what they had, helped their neighbors when times got tough, and didn't pretend to be something they weren't. It was a good place to raise a kid. Or at least, I'd thought it was. My phone buzzed with a text from Devin. "Dad, I talked to Jessica. She agreed to see me tonight. I'm going to apologize and tell her about our deal. Maybe she'll give me another chance. I texted back, good. Be honest with her. About everything. I will. And Dad? Thank you. For not giving up on me. Never gave up on you, son. Just got disappointed for a while. That first Saturday, Devin showed up at my house at 6 a.m. sharp. He was wearing brand new work boots, new jeans, and a flannel shirt that still had the creases from the packaging. He looked like he was dressed for a costume party where the theme was blue-collar worker. Morning, Dad, he said, and I could tell he was nervous. Morning. You eat breakfast? Yeah, coffee and a protein bar. I shook my head. That's not going to cut it, come on. I made him eggs, bacon, toast, and hash browns. Real food for a real day's work. Eat all of it, I said. You're going to need the energy. We drove to a duplex I owned about 20 minutes away. The tenant in Unit B had moved out the week before and the place needed a complete renovation before I could rent it again. What are we doing? Devin asked as we pulled up to the building. Everything, I said. And I meant it. Over the next 8 hours, we ripped out old carpet, pulled up damaged subflooring, tore down a wall between the kitchen and living room, and hauled about 2 tons of debris to a dumpster. By lunch, Devin's fancy flannel shirt was soaked with sweat and covered in dust. His new work boots were scuffed and dirty. His hands, which had never done anything more strenuous than type on a keyboard, were already starting to blister. How are you holding up? I asked as we sat on the front steps eating sandwiches I'd packed. Devin looked at his hands, flexing his fingers gingerly. I'm okay. This is harder than I thought it would be, but I'm okay. It gets easier. Your body adjusts. Is this what you did every day? For 30 years? This and worse. Some days in 100-degree heat, some days in freezing rain. Some days when I was sick, some days when I was worried about paying the rent or keeping the lights on. Devin was quiet, thinking about that. I never really understood, he said finally. When I was a kid, I knew you worked construction, but I guess I never thought about what that actually meant. Most people don't. They see the finished building, not the 1,000 hours of sweat and sore muscles that went into making it. Why did you keep doing it? Even after you got the inheritance? I took a bite of my sandwich, considering the question. Because I'm good at it. Because I like building things. Because there's something satisfying about starting with nothing and ending with something useful. But you could do anything now. You could retire, travel, buy a mansion. I could. But what would be the point? I like my life, Devin. I like my house. I like my work. I like my neighborhood. Money doesn't change any of that. We worked until 5 that afternoon. By the time we loaded the tools back into my truck, Devin could barely lift his arms. His face was red from exertion, his clothes were filthy, and he moved like an old man with arthritis. $64, I said, handing him cash as we sat in my truck. 8 hours at $8 an hour. Devin stared at the money like he'd never seen cash before. This is what you made your first day? Less, actually. Minimum wage was lower then. He folded the bills carefully and put them in his wallet. It feels different than my regular paycheck. How so? Heavier, I guess. Like it cost more to earn. That's because it did. On the drive home, Devin was quiet. I could tell he was processing the day, trying to understand something he'd never had to think about before. Dad, he said as I pulled into his apartment complex. Can I ask you something? Sure. When you were working construction all those years, supporting me and Mom, paying for my college, were you happy? It was a good question. A hard question. Some days, I said honestly. I was proud of providing for you, proud of watching you succeed. But was I happy with the work itself? Not always. Some days it was just what I had to do to take care of my family. And now? Now I do it because I choose to, not because I have to. That makes a difference. Devin nodded slowly. I think I understand. Do you? I think so. You're not trying to punish me by making me work construction. You're trying to show me the difference between having to do something and choosing to do something. That's part of it. What's the other part? I looked at my son, really looked at him. Dirty, exhausted, humbled in a way he hadn't been since he was a child. The other part is teaching you that every job, every honest way of making a living, deserves respect, including the job that made your success possible. The next weekend was the same routine. 6 a.m. breakfast, full day of work, $64 in cash. This time we painted the interior of the duplex. Primer, 2 coats of paint, trim work. Devin's technique was terrible at first, but he got better as the day went on. I can see why you'd be good at this, he said during a break, looking around at the walls we'd finished. It's like creating something from nothing. Exactly. I sit at a desk all day working on marketing campaigns that most people will ignore. But this, when we're done, people will actually live here. That's the difference between making a living and making a life. By the third Saturday, something had shifted. Devin showed up in old clothes that actually fit the work. His hands were developing calluses instead of blisters, and he wasn't completely exhausted by lunchtime. More importantly, he was starting to ask different questions. How do you decide which properties to buy? He asked as we replaced a water heater. Location, condition, rental potential. Same as any investment, just with more dirt under your fingernails. And you really make $48,000 a month from all of them? Some months more, some less. Depends on vacancies, maintenance costs, property taxes. That's more than I make in a year. Yeah, but it took 30 years of $8 an hour days to get here. On the 4th Saturday, Devin brought coffee for both of us and insisted on buying breakfast. Small gestures, but they mattered. Jessica and I set a new wedding date, he told me as we worked on installing new kitchen cabinets. 6 months from now. Smaller guest list, simpler reception. How much simpler? About $30,000 instead of $80,000. That's more manageable. Yeah. Jessica was relieved, actually. She said she never wanted the big production anyway, but she was afraid to say something because I seemed so excited about it. We worked in comfortable silence for a while. Then Devin said, I've been thinking about what you said, about earning your help. Yeah? I don't want your money for the wedding. I stopped what I was doing and looked at him. What do you mean? I mean, I want to pay for it myself, Jessica and I together. Maybe ask both sets of parents to chip in a little, but mostly handle it ourselves. Why? Because I want to know that we did it. That our wedding, our marriage, our life together, it's something we built, not something that was handed to us. I felt something loosen in my chest that I hadn't realized was tight. What about the house? I asked. The craftsman where you proposed? Devin was quiet for a long moment. Keep it, he said finally. Rent it to some young couple who'll appreciate it. Maybe someday when Jessica and I have saved enough to buy it fair and square, we'll make you an offer. You sure about that? I'm sure. I want to earn it, the way you earned everything you have. By the 5th Saturday, we weren't just working together. We were talking, really talking, the way we used to when Devin was a kid, about his job, about Jessica, about his plans for the future. I've been thinking about starting my own business, he said, as we fixed a leaky roof on one of my rental houses. What kind of business? Marketing consulting. I'm good at what I do, and I think I could make more money working for myself than working for someone else. That's a big risk. Yeah, but I've been watching you these past few weeks, watching how you manage your properties, deal with contractors, solve problems. You're basically running a dozen different businesses at once. I never thought about it that way, but I guess you're right. If you can do it, I can do it. Different skill set, though. True, but the same principles, right? Work hard, treat people fairly, build something that lasts. I smiled. When did you get so smart? I had a good teacher. On the 6th and final Saturday, we worked on my own house. Nothing major, just some trim work that needed painting and a few loose boards on the back deck. But it felt symbolic, like we were fixing more than just the house. "Dad," Devin said as we sat on the newly repaired deck sharing a beer after the work was done, "I need to tell you something." "What's that?" "These past 6 weeks, working with you, it's been the best part of my week." I looked at my son. He was leaner than he'd been 6 weeks ago, his hands rough and capable, his face tanned from working outdoors. But more than that, he seemed more settled, more comfortable in his own skin. "Mine too, son. I understand now what you were trying to teach me. It wasn't about the work itself. It was about understanding that all honest work has dignity, that success doesn't mean you're better than the people who helped you get there. And I'm sorry. Not just for what I said at the party, but for the way I've been treating you for the past 2 years, looking down on you, being embarrassed by where I came from. You deserved better from me." I clapped him on the shoulder. "You were just finding your way. We all make mistakes when we're figuring out who we want to be." "Yeah, but I should have known better. You raised me better than that." We sat in comfortable silence for a while, watching the sun set over the neighborhood where Devin had grown up. "So," he said finally, "what happens now? Now you plan your wedding, start your business, build the life you want with Jessica. What about us? What about us? You're still my son. I'm still your dad. Maybe now we can actually be friends too." Devin smiled. "I'd like that." The wedding was beautiful, small, intimate, held in the backyard of Jessica's parents' house. Devin looked handsome in a rented tux. Jessica looked radiant in a simple dress she'd found at a consignment shop. The whole thing cost about $15,000, money they'd saved themselves over 6 months of careful budgeting. I gave a toast at the reception, talked about watching Devin grow up, about the man he'd become, about the lessons we'd learned from each other. I didn't mention the money, the properties, or the inheritance. I just talked about my son and how proud I was of him. After the reception, as people were cleaning up, Devin pulled me aside. "Dad, I have something for you," he said, handing me an envelope. Inside was a check for $384, made out to me, signed by Devin with "construction wages, 6 weeks" written in the memo line. "Devin, you don't need to." "Yes, I do. You paid me fair wages for fair work. I want to pay rent for the life lessons." I tried to hand the check back, but he wouldn't take it. "Besides," he said with a grin, "I can afford it. My consulting business is taking off. Turns out all those Saturday mornings taught me something about work ethic that my clients really appreciate." 3 months later, Devin and Jessica put an offer on a house. Not the Craftsman where he'd proposed. They weren't ready for that yet. But a nice little place in an up-and-coming neighborhood. A fixer-upper that needed work, which didn't scare Devin anymore. "We're going to do a lot of the renovation ourselves," he told me over dinner at my house, a weekly tradition we'd started after the wedding. "Jessica's pretty handy with a paintbrush, and I've learned a thing or two about construction." "Need any help?" I asked. "Actually, yeah. Think you could teach us how to install hardwood floors?" "I think that can be arranged." 6 months after that, I got a call from the trust managers in Dallas. The real estate market was booming, and my properties were worth almost $22 million now. The rental income had grown to over $60,000 a month. "Mr. Morrison," the manager said, "you might want to consider diversifying your portfolio. Maybe some stocks, some bonds, something less concentrated in real estate." "Maybe," I said. "Let me think about it." But I didn't think about it long. Instead, I called Devin. "Hey son, you busy?" "Just finishing up a client presentation. What's up?" "I've got a business proposition for you." "Oh yeah? How would you feel about becoming a partner in a real estate investment company?" There was a long pause. "Dad, if this is about giving me money, it's not about giving you anything. It's about earning something. I need someone I trust to help me expand the business. Someone with marketing skills, someone who understands both the financial side and the human side of what we're doing." "You're serious?" "Dead serious. It would mean long hours getting your hands dirty, probably taking a pay cut from your consulting work, at least at first. But it would also mean building something together, something that could last for generations. Another pause. Then, when do we start? How about Monday? That Monday morning, Devin showed up at my house at 6 a.m. sharp. He was wearing work boots, old jeans, and a flannel shirt that had seen better days. But he also had a briefcase full of business plans, marketing strategies, and ideas for growing the company. "Ready to get to work, partner?" I asked. "Ready, Dad." We shook hands on my front porch, then got in my truck and drove off to look at a property that might be our next investment. Father and son, working together, building something that mattered. The funny thing is, we never did talk about that night at the engagement party again. Not directly anyway, but sometimes when we're working on a particularly tough project, or when Devin's dealing with a difficult tenant, or when we're celebrating another successful property acquisition, I catch him looking at me with something that wasn't there before. Respect. Not because I have money, though that doesn't hurt, but because he finally understands that success isn't about how much you make or how far you climb above where you started. It's about building something worthwhile, treating people fairly, and never forgetting the hands that helped you up. Last week, Devin called me with news. He and Jessica are expecting their first child. "A boy," he said, his voice thick with emotion. "We're going to name him Thomas, after Uncle Tommy." He would have liked that. "Dad, I want to ask you something." "Shoot." "When little Tommy gets old enough, will you teach him how to work with his hands, the way you taught me?" I looked out the window of my little house, the same house I'd lived in for 20 years, the same house Devin used to be embarrassed by, and smiled. "Son," I said, "it would be my honor." Because that's the thing about real wealth. It's not the money in your bank account or the properties in your portfolio. It's the values you pass down, the lessons you teach, the love you share with the people who matter most. And that's a legacy worth more than all the property deeds in the world. The Craftsman house? I still own it. Still rent it out to a nice young couple who reminds me a lot of Devin and Jessica when they were first starting out. But I've got the deed ready to transfer, just waiting for the right moment. Maybe when little Tommy turns 18. Maybe when Devin's business grows enough that he can afford to buy it outright. Maybe just when the timing feels right. Because some gifts are worth waiting for, some lessons take time to learn, and some stories, the best stories, don't end with revenge. They end with redemption. If this story hit you in the feels, and I'm betting it did, do me a favor. Hit that like button, subscribe if you haven't already, and tell me in the comments, what's the most valuable lesson someone in your family ever taught you? Not the easiest lesson, but the most valuable one. The kind of lesson that stung a little when you learned it but made you a better person in the end. And if you've got a story about family, about misunderstandings that turned into something beautiful, or about learning to appreciate the people who helped make you who you are, share it. Because these stories matter. They remind us that it's never too late to make things right with the people we love. Thanks for sticking with me through this whole crazy journey. Devin and I are still working together. Still learning from each other, still building something that I hope will last long after we're both gone. And every Saturday morning, when I pick him up for work, I remember that sometimes the best revenge isn't proving someone wrong. Sometimes the best revenge is proving them right. Right about the kind of person you've always been, even when they couldn't see it. Until next time, keep building something that matters. And never ever forget where you came from. Because the people who helped you get there, they're worth remembering, they're worth honoring, and they're definitely worth more than any house, no matter how perfect the backyard might be.